Setbacks carry a specific type of weight. Beyond the error itself lies the isolating pressure of the crowd watching you, creating a sense of total exposure that makes recovery feel impossible. Consider a boy named Raghav living in a quiet rural village. His day started before sunrise. He would plow the fields, water the crops, and work the soil until soaked in sweat. Only then would he wash up and spend his remaining hours late into the night studying. Despite his grueling schedule, his intelligence was undeniable. The village expected him to top his exams, branding him their golden boy, and effectively making him the steward of the community's pride. When your identity is built on public expectation, your psychological baseline is inherently fragile. Self-worth becomes dependent on a streak of success that hasn't yet faced a real-world collision. That collision happened when the exam results arrived. Raghav, the village's scholar, failed a core subject. His environment shifted instantly. The dirt path from his house to the fields turned into a gauntlet of whispers and sharp insults. The same neighbors who praised him now openly mocked the smart boy who couldn't pass a single test. This meter shows a state called audience paralysis. When we face social rejection, the brain prioritizes monitoring the external threat. As you see here, 90% of the bandwidth is consumed by defensive processing, leaving almost nothing for the actual work of moving forward. Raghav retreated into silence. Under the constant weight of the village's judgment, his confidence fractured, and his progress on his studies simply stopped. As long as the brain's resources are dedicated to processing external noise, the internal capacity required for a comeback remains physically unavailable. Reaching his limit, Raghav went to his teacher, Karim. He confessed that the psychological weight of the mockery was no longer tolerable. Karim bypassed verbal comfort and instead prescribed a high-stakes physical challenge. He instructed Raghav to carry a large pot of milk through the exact same village path where his tormentors were waiting. The pot was filled to the absolute brim. The instruction was absolute. Not a single drop was allowed to fall during the entire walk. This wasn't a punishment. Karim was engineering a scenario that forced Raghav's brain to prioritize a physical reality over a social one. The next morning, Raghav stepped onto the path. The pot was heavy and shaky. The villagers were there, as usual, ready to laugh and judge his every move. But as the crowd began their mockery, Raghav experienced an internal shift. His eyes locked onto the surface of the milk. His breathing slowed. His hands became steady. This illustrates cognitive override. Because balancing the milk demanded 100% of Raghav's sensory power, his brain lacked the capacity to hear the insults. The central focal point expands, pushing the chaotic noise out of his perception entirely. When he reached the fields, he set the pot down and realized the silence was absolute. He hadn't heard a single voice along the entire path. You erase your critics by starving your brain of the bandwidth needed to perceive them. Karim made the connection explicit. The milk pot was his work, his goals, and his future. Raghav applied this same concentration to his studies and his fieldwork. He focused on the immediate task with the same intensity he used to balance the milk. The fear that once kept him indoors evaporated. His confidence returned through the simple, repetitive act of his work, independent of any outside validation. The village didn't change. The neighbors were still judging him. But his new method of processing reality rendered their voices irrelevant. This resilience follows the law of depth of field in photography. As this lens focuses light rays onto a singular target, something happens to everything else. When the lens converges on a foreground subject, the background elements are physically forced into a scattered, indistinguishable blur. The same mechanic applies to your attention. When you lock onto your immediate habits and goals, the negativity of the crowd loses its resolution and fades. If you are currently paralyzed by a setback, stop trying to fight the noise. Pick up your milk pot and lock in your goal. The sheer intensity of that focus blurs